How we doing, family? Welcome back, welcome back. Hope your days are going well. So we're just gonna have Christmas right around the corner here, so the holiday spirit. Yeah, I'll be honest with you, I can't say I'm not a massive fan of Christmas. I guess I find myself getting less caught up in the fanfare of Christmas while still appreciating and enjoying the spirit that Christmas brings. That is that feeling of family, of closeness, of love, of kindness, and coming together, while also recognizing that's been really hijacked by consumerism. But I want to drop in and share a transmission to you, and this transmission is inspired by a dear friend, a former client from doing couples work and doing individual work, but really above all that, a soul sister, really really dear to my heart, and we're having a conversation, private conversation, just personal, share about what's coming up for us. And I expressed to her something that was how I was feeling within my marriage. And she reflected back to me, okay, well, that sounds like I'm hearing like protection in there, right? Now, when I first heard her kind of reflect that back, not to a direct reflection, just as she was processing herself to understand how she could be able to potentially navigate her own journey in her own life with her own relationships with her husband, with her kids, her family, mom, everyone in her life, just kind of really understanding what I was sharing, how that could be relevant to her, right? But when she said that sounds like protection, my first reaction was like, no, it's not. Because in my mind, I know better than to protect myself from people who I care about, and especially my wife. But when I sat with it and I was really saying, well, protection, why does she say protection? And I went back and I listened to what I shared with her, and I was like, yeah, well, to be fair, there is protection there. I'm not going to get into the details, but at that point in time, my wife and I had a conversation, and I was a bit tender still. I was protecting myself from the interaction, from the energy that I was feeling from my wife. Not because my wife did anything in particular to me, but just because that's just what was coming up for me, right? But what I really want to share is like in the protection, to me, there is nothing wrong to protect yourself, to protect myself, oneself, on a temporary and very conscious, aware basis. There's nothing wrong with it. And I even think at times it's necessary and really needed for us to be able to survive or get through something, especially with so many things that we have going on in our life, from our profession, our relationships, being a parent, our relationships with our friends, our families, our hobbies, everything that's going on. Our energy and our attention is going in a lot of different ways. And so being able to have the awareness to understand, okay, at what area and to what degree do I need to put almost like a security field around myself to protect my energy, protect my happiness, protect my sense of well-being from different people in different situations and different environments. And rightfully so, she reflected something back that was very true, and that's actually what I was doing. I was sharing that time my wife and I had a pretty intense discussion. I don't know if it's an argument, but definitely an intense discussion that just a couple days before, and I was still feeling the effects of that. And I did feel myself kind of putting some emotional distance between my wife and I, because I still felt a bit charged up by it. I still felt, sensitive by it. And I wasn't in a position, or I didn't feel like I wanted to be in a position to kind of leave myself open to my wife, because it didn't feel like we were in a place to communicate in a way that could be productive. And so because it wasn't feeling productive, it was feeling like a drain on my energy. It was feeling like it was distracting me. It was demotivating me to move on to other things in my life. Again, not because it's my wife's fault. That's just my experience of the intense discussion that we had and how it made me feel. Nothing more, nothing less. So I want to come back and say protection on a temporary, intentional, very a conscious basis, I believe is going to be necessary at times. But I also understand this. Protection of any way you look at it, To protect yourself is to put a barrier, to put armor on, to close yourself in, to keep people, things out that may threaten you, that may do you harm, especially if you feel like you're in a vulnerable state. So when you put these boundaries, these walls, this protection, whatever it is, to keep yourself safe inside for whatever degree it is and whatever reason why, understand that that also prevents other things from coming in. All right? Now, what do we usually protect ourselves from? We usually protect ourselves from what we perceive is a threat, whether it's a physical threat, a real threat, or just an emotional threat. Right now, in that moment, I can honestly say I felt emotionally threatened by what's happening with my wife. I wasn't in physical danger. My wife didn't attack me. She did not berate me emotionally or verbally, anything like that. It's just based on what's happening in my life right now. In the discussion that we had, I felt like I was under attack. Therefore, I put up the protection, right? Now, understand this. In a lot of ways, protection is really non-judgmental. It's unbiased. It doesn't really know what you're protecting it from. So I'm saying that because what I've noticed, but when I've done this in the past before, and my awareness really wasn't as high, I also protect myself from maybe her loving actions that want to come in, the subtleties in her softness that want to come in. Maybe she wants to have a peace offering gesture to me. But if I'm in protection mode, sometimes it's hard to see or even feel that because I am in defensive mode or protection mode. So just be aware of that. Be aware that when we put that up, that it's going to almost be a catch-all for everything that wants to come in, the things that was the perceived threat and the things that aren't. Perhaps now my wife has been trying to send me signals and clues and messages directly, indirectly, subtly, energetically that says, hey, I love you. I want to be with you. I want to hold you. I want to feel you. But because I'm protecting myself from this person, am I blocking that? And am I not letting that in? Okay? This is why I say, if it's going to be up, let it be temporary, let it be intentional, and let you have the consciousness. The other part of this is just like any kind of fence. I remember this coming from hearing this from one of my, it was weird childhood favorite movie, The Hand That Rocks the Cradle. And there's this scene when Sullivan, is it Sullivan? I think his name's Sullivan, the maintenance guy. He comes to the home and he asks the family, hey, you guys want a fence? So is the fence to keep people out or is it to keep people in? And the owners essentially said, well, I guess a bit of both. He says, okay. And in that phrase always stuck with me, that distinction of like, well, what would you do differently? Is the fence going to keep people out or keep people in? And likewise, when we put this boundary, this layer between ourselves and someone else, also, what are you not letting out to share to someone you care about? Because when we are in defensive mode, when we feel vulnerable, when we feel like we may be under attack, maybe because I'm guarded, I'm not thinking about how to share love to my wife. How can I see her differently? How can I get beyond my fear, my tenderness, my sensitivity, my fragility in this moment, and actually be able to transmit something to her that she needs to feel, or actually that I want to transmit. But because I feel like I might not get it returned, received, I'm unwilling to put that back out. So just like Sullivan in the asking the fence, well, is it to keep things out or keep things in? The same thing happens when we protect ourselves, especially with our partners, is that one, we may not allow them to be able to come into our space with love, intention, forgiveness, whatever it may be. And two, we may be less willing to give that back. And this is what can keep us in a stalemate. This can keep that tension building up unnecessarily for hours, days, weeks, even more. I know I've been there before. I've been there more times than I even care to admit. And this is why I say again, if you are going to protect yourself because you need to get through a certain moment in time, for whatever reason that may be. For me right now is we are in this transition right now of closing on a new home, and it requires more financial resources that we don't have right now. Just gonna be honest about that. And I'm feeling a lot of pressure and stress on putting my energy into generating more revenue, more income, so that way we can make sure that we close on our home. And when my wife and I had this very intense discussion that didn't feel productive, it didn't feel like it was going anywhere, I felt a lot of my energy come out and get sucked out of me that left me feeling almost empty. Let me feel demotivated for the rest of the day, actually the day after as well. And so in that moment, I decided, you know what, right now, the output of energy into this conversation with my wife in this way is not productive. Therefore, I'm going to save it. I'm going to protect the energy and put it towards something that's more immediate right now. Because at the end of the day, I can pour in the energy into this aspect of the marriage, into my wife, into this conversation, in a way that's not draining, it's not rejuvenating, and drain myself. And this may last, again, days, weeks, and months. And yet and still on this side, there is a need to generate more revenue to make sure we're in our position to close on our home. Okay? So we may have this part together from the relationship standpoint, but then we may not have the home. Now, the other part of this is not to say that it needs to be 50 all or nothing, right? I also want to share that with you to avoid that trap. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing. It's simply saying within the marriage, this particular area, this particular conversation that my wife were discussing, this is not going to be an area where my energy is best used because it's draining. And that I take the whole responsibility. It's draining because it's a struggle for me to manage my emotions in this area. Again, not to put the blame on my wife, and not to say that my wife couldn't do anything different or she doesn't need to change anything to have a more productive conversation. That's all true. But rather than focusing or trying to drive myself crazy on what she could be doing, what she should be doing from my perspective, it's just recognizing that I'm feeling like I'm twisting myself in knots simply because of how I'm managing and moving through my emotions in this area. So my hand goes up and says, okay, Brian, right now, you are not as effective right now. You're draining yourself. You're getting yourself tied into knots. This part of the relationship is not where you're going to put your energy right now for this moment because this energy is well needed over here. So allowing two things to be true at the same time, I'm not going to give my wife any attention. We're not going to talk about anything. We're going to neglect the whole marriage because I have to go over here to the money side of things. No, I don't believe that's going to be the productive way either, because the union, my marriage with my wife, is one of my most important assets. Apart from my faith and making sure I'm taken care of, the union, the home, the temple that we have created together is my most important asset that I have, that I think deserves my attention and my energy. Because at the end of the day, when I go out into this world and I feel like I'm getting beat up and I feel like I'm using my energy to move through certain challenges and emotional blocks and feel like the world is trying to bring me down, I want to be able to come to our physical home and our energetic and spiritual home with my wife, aka our marriage, our sacred union together, and feel recharged in that. And so if I neglect this space and it becomes dilapidated, the garden becomes overgrown with weeds, it's unstructured, it's a bit sporadic, it doesn't feel like it's all together, I'm gonna come out from the outside world depleted and then even be more depleted in this area, this space that hasn't been tended to. So for this reason, I'm saying, be able to say maybe this one part of the garden isn't going to get that much water today, but do not forget to water the entire garden. Do not forget to do the maintenance, because it's all going to affect the bigger picture of what it is that you want to do, in this case for me as well. Yeah, that feels good to be shared. Around protection, around protecting yourself, especially again, I just want to recap this because this is something I feel a lot, and something I see with a lot of people, a lot of different clients, people in my family, who sometimes we get really in this stuck place because we either feel we have to give ourselves fully to the people who we care about, whether it's our partner, our own kids, our parents, our clients. We have to give ourselves all wholly to them, and accept that maybe that I'm losing energy. I don't feel like I feel safe here, and I got to keep on giving, because to be a good person, to be a good mom, a good dad, a good husband, a good wife, whatever it is, I need to keep on giving, even though I'm sucked dry. We forget that there's another way to do this. It's choosing to protect ourselves temporarily with awareness, with intention, to understand what a protection does. It blocks coming in, it blocks going out, and that there will be a consequence to that. But accepting and being aware that everything that we do in life is going to be a game of, an understanding of a give and a take. If I put my energy here, something else is not going to have my energy. And that's okay. Especially if you're able to communicate that with your partner, to say, hey, in this area, let's just put this down for a moment and let's revisit this, because right now our energy as a unit belongs somewhere else. Even for myself, my energy belongs somewhere else, even if my wife isn't able to have that conversation with me. Because if I'm drained, if I'm tired, if I'm fatigued, if I'm frustrated because I keep putting myself in a situation where my energy is getting sucked out, is it her fault or anyone else's fault, or is it mine because I chose to stay there? For me, it comes down to my responsibility to be able to keep me in a place where I can make sure that I'm taking care of my energy, my happiness, and make sure that I am feeling good here, so that way I can step back into this space with my marriage, and be just as effective as a husband as possible. So let me know what you think. Let me know if you have any questions around that, or even your feedback, your perspective on this. This is the way I see it right now. Protection, especially around people that we love and care about, and it will evolve. This is what feels like the best truth to me, to have somewhat of a balance in regards to keeping myself safe, making sure I'm taken care of, and intentionally building a thriving marriage with my wife. Thank you for listening. We'll see y'all next time. Peace, love, and respect. Beautiful people.